I'm Brandi Kruse, and this is Undivided. Undivided is brought to you by 1530 Mortgage. Visit them at 1530mortgage.com. Today, as elections officials across the country face attacks from the fringes, would nonpartisan leaders be best suited for those roles?
If there's one place that the parties don't belong, it's in this particular seat.
Plus, an undercovered aspect of the nation's border crisis.
If there was a real confrontation, how would that play out?
Ali Bradley introduces us to the private citizens caught in the middle of a public debate. Plus, where our nation stands a year after the January 6th insurrection. I'm Brandi Kruse. Thanks for being here. It's been a challenging year plus for elections officials across the country who bear the brunt of former President Donald Trump's claims of a stolen second term. The result is a segment of the electorate that has so little faith in our democratic process that they'd rather not vote because they don't think their ballot will be counted in the way they intended. The climate around elections is sure to play a role in this year's race for Secretary of State here in Washington. Our former secretary, Republican Kim Wyman, resigned in November to take a job with the Biden administration. Governor Jay Inslee has temporarily replaced her with a Democrat, Senator Steve Hobbs, while the GOP would understandably like the seat to return to Republican hands in November. But one candidate thinks perhaps now more than ever it is time for a nonpartisan to take over that office and maybe restore some faith in the democratic process among those who have lost it. Her name is Julie Anderson. She has served as the auditor in Pierce County, one of Washington's most populous, for more than a decade. And she realizes that as she runs for Secretary of State without the backing of a political party, she has a tough road ahead. This isn't something you've just stumbled upon, right? You've been saying for some time you don't consider yourself either a Democrat or Republican.
Yeah, for quite a while. And I pretty famously said to the News Tribune that if I ran for another office, I wouldn't run under a party banner. And that's the case today.
And you don't like to say independent, right?
Right.
Okay, why is that?
Because independent is an alternative political party, and nonpartisan means I don't belong to any group or political party. Nonpartisan for me is a set of values, not a group. So I'm unaffiliated with any group or PAC or party.
At the same time, doing this is very challenging. You know that. You've been in politics. You get the money, you get the power from the party. Yes. So how do you, as a nonpartisan, not affiliated with either major political party, how do you raise money? How do you do all the things that are required to win these days?
Hard work, friends and family is where I'm starting now. It's early days in the campaign. And I'm hoping that the more people that I talk to, the more word will spread. And there have got to be people out there that are wanting to invest in, I think, kind of what I would call is a movement. I think that they see that the Secretary of State's office is substantially different, that it's ministerial in nature, and that if there's one place that the parties don't belong, it's in this particular seat. And I think that I'll be able to attract major donors and organizations that believe the same thing and really would like to see Washington State be a trendsetter and have this trend spread to other states.
The last year plus have been challenging for election officials across the country. To what extent has that seeped into your office? Have you been targeted? Have you been any of those things? I mean, when we look at what's happened to Kim Wyman, for instance, and other Georgia, have you experienced that?
Well, I don't want to minimize their experience. Intimidation of election officials is a serious business, and I know it's something that the FBI is taking very, very seriously. I've been on lots of Homeland Security calls and briefings about that. But that has not been our experience, neither me or any of our elections staff. Yeah, it is good. And I was proud to say that during 2020, which was a little amped up, we didn't see the voter intimidation, we didn't see hijinks, and Pierce County voters behaved very well. They were enthusiastic. There was activity, there was enthusiasm, there were rallies, but in terms of doing what they were supposed to do and letting other people vote, I was really proud of Pierce County voters.
Good, that's good to hear.
You know, I continue to hear from people still there are people who are going to be watching this, Julie, who believe that Donald Trump won the election in 2020.
He didn't.
Good. I was just going to ask you. I knew the answer, but I had to ask anyway. There are people who believe that there was such widespread fraud in our state that Lauren Culp won the election.
He didn't.
I know. And so I'm glad to hear you say that as well. But these are people who have said that they don't even want to vote because they don't believe that their vote as written will be counted as written. How do you try to change the mind of someone who believes that?
Oh, there's several things that I'd like to break that apart.
Yeah.
First of all, for people that are leading the charge on those kind of theories of mistrust, who are amplifying those theories, I'd say, please sue us. Would you just hurry up and lay down the paper and go to court and sue us? Because we're not being provided with any evidence or any documentation. We're being provided with generalized concerns and the possibility of fraud rather than fraud. So we want things to react to, actual evidence, names, records, something for us to sit down with those complainants and work through and explain. And if proven correct, my goodness, we want to pursue action, right? For other folks who are just have thrown their grappling hook into those campaigns, those are just regular everyday citizens who, thank goodness, are civically engaged and concerned and care. So kudos for them for being concerned and caring. But because they've just thrown a grappling hook into a theory without doing any kind of independent work on their own, I really want to hear from them and election administrators in all counties. Definitely, we want them to come take a tour. We want to sit down and have a conversation with them. That's remedy number one. I have not found any individual or organization that doesn't feel better after they've had a visit or a sit down with us. But those are the people who have good faith concerns, as opposed to concerns that are, oh, it's Lauren. No, just kidding. He's scheduling a tour right now.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it.
He was invited, but anyway. Those are people with good faith concerns, as opposed to folks who are promoting concerns to raise money or perhaps get attention or to gain their own notoriety. So we love giving tours. Another thing that I think election officials can do, and I look forward to doing in a leadership role in the Secretary of State's office, is expanding our audit trail, because it's not enough for people to hear, trust us, we see no evidence of fraud. I think that they want independent verification as much as possible. So increased and different types of audits, having an attitude as an election administrator that that voters don't understand, trust us, we've got this, where's your evidence? Those are responses that just don't cut it anymore. So election administrators need to stretch, and we need to sit down and figure out, what do we need to change? Now, the forensic audits that are being called for, the Maricopa-style forensic audits, we can't just say, see, it didn't work. And we have rigorously rejected calls for a forensic audit in Washington State in all of our jurisdictions. We've all been asked to do that. Because you don't retroactively go back and audit a certified election. Audits are all about maintaining and establishing standards to audit to. So I'm open to having conversations with voters and stakeholders about what is missing in the current auditing systems that we have. And can we create systems to audit to in the future, so that we're all playing by the same rules and expectations, and it's reasonable to audit to those standards. Totally open to that.
That is part of my conversation with Julie Anderson, the Pierce County auditor who is running as a nonpartisan for Secretary of State. You can watch our full interview by becoming an undivided subscriber on Patreon or Locals. A new year, but still the same unresolved issues at our nation's southern border. As the immigration crisis rages on, there is now a battle being fought on private lands across the southern U.S. With border agents busy processing migrants, border security is at times taking a back seat, leaving landowners on the front lines of a worsening reality. Undivided contributor Allie Bradley embedded with the Texas Department of Public Safety to see firsthand what this reality is like for not only ranchers, but the so-called runners.
The Texas DPS Elite Brush Team and Texas National Guard run through thick, thorny terrain and near-freezing temperatures. The teams on the ground follow the prompts from the air.
I got you.
Embedded with these crews, within 3 hours, we encountered 4 small groups in just one county, learning firsthand that these groups are not the family units we're seeing in Yuma, Arizona, or in Del Rio, Texas, where they're crossing the Rio and self-surrendering to border agents. Texas DPS Lieutenant Christopher Oliveira says the majority of these so-called runners we encountered were single adults from Mexico. Texas DPS made more than 2,500 arrests for criminal trespass since June, and it's those unprecedented numbers that are causing concern for some Texas ranch owners. Lisa Connolly and her family have a ranch in Kinney County. She says on average, she would see 5 or 6 migrants on their property in a year. Now it's happening daily.
I feel safer with it on.
Lisa, who is a retired elementary and high school teacher, now straps her pistol to her hip to go outside to water her plants or feed their dogs.
You know that you would use it if you needed to, but the thought of having to do that is so scary. If there was a real confrontation, how would that play out? What would I be? What would that be like? And I just pray that it's someone that wants to just continue to pass through, that they're not wanting to stop. But the reality is they're stopping. They're stopping at places.
And they're demanding things, well, give us water, give us food, give us a ride. No, get off my property. As long as they're on their property and they can carry a gun, they can have it on their hip, they can carry a rifle, whatever the case may be, to protect themselves.
Lisa says she's grateful that the Kinney County Sheriff supports the citizens living there.
Now, can they go out and just say, hey, they're on my property and shoot them? No, that's not how it works.
Customs and Border Protection reports show the number of people crossing into the U.S. has not slowed down. Sheriff Coe says he felt like his back was up against a wall.
According to the Texas Constitution, I can deputize people to help.
The sheriff said he was granted permission to deputize 10 people. He says he's already sworn in 3 who still have peace officer status. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has expanded Operation Lone Star several times, this time to allow for law enforcement on a state and county level to make arrests for criminal trespass.
The numbers haven't gone down. In fact, they've gone up. Their usual caseload a month is 10. Now
10 a
we're
month.
looking at about, now we're looking at about 600 a month.
According to Kinney County Attorney Brent Smith, they have made more than 2,000 arrests for criminal trespass since August. As part of Operation Lone Star, Texas DPS has installed thousands of cameras on private lands along the border.
It's not knowing who's on your property. It's also, we've had vehicles stolen. When I say we, the county residents have had a vehicle stolen. People being trying grabbed out of their truck at gates. Everyone's frustrated. Everyone's sick and tired of having this and not having their, peaceful right to their property.
Ranchers like the Connollys, whose livelihood depends on their land, say they're consistently having to make repairs to fences being cut by migrants or to water lines that have been severed.
So what does that mean for you?
That means that I get to work on weekends, which I'm going out right now to fix the water line. God calls you to be loving, of course, but that doesn't mean you need to disregard the laws of the land, and especially of the greatest nation in the world, the United States.
What is affecting us today is going to be affecting the rest of the United States in the months and weeks to come.
Allie, thanks for being here. That's some interesting stuff. When I look at this ranch family, is there any element of, they've just chalked this up to part of living so close to the border, or is there a real growing frustration for them?
Well, there is an absolute growing frustration for these families, and the Connollys aren't the only ones I've talked to either, Brandi. This is something that, a lot of people dismiss in the United States that aren't living along the border because we think, oh, it's a border community. They're used to immigration. They're used to crossings, things like that. But they're not used to these numbers. This is not a normalcy for them. Her having her gun attached to her is not normal for her. This is not something that these communities have dealt with to this magnitude.
Well, and one of the things I think is interesting is we're talking about a county and a ranch that's like 40 miles off of the U.S. Mexico border. And so then you get to thinking about, okay, if these are individuals who are coming across, they want to seek asylum, they're going to self-surrender, they would have done that, right, before they got to 40 miles into the U.S. So I guess what kind of alarm bells does that raise for these families and for law enforcement when they encounter people who are already that far into the interior?
Yeah, and that's what Lisa was telling me too, Brandi. She was saying, what is their intent? Why are they coming through ranches and being smuggled in or having a guide or a coyote bring them through? Why don't they just go to Del Rio and get on a bus to what she says is Anywhere USA, which is what we are seeing, right? We are seeing these family units. We're seeing several people. We're seeing single adult men. I saw some from Uzbekistan come across and self-surrender. They purposefully go and look for these border agents so that they can claim asylum, because if they don't, they're just trespassing. Their hopes for asylum go out the door. Lisa, her fear really comes from that. Why aren't they going to a port of entry? Why aren't they self-surrendering? What is their intent here? And that's what she said. And that's something that it doesn't matter how you slice it here. It doesn't matter if you can say there's one bad guy in a whole group of 5,000 or there's zero. That is a fear that is real for these people. And it's valid, right? They have every right to be scared, knowing those things that they know with the numbers, as I said, that we're seeing right now.
Well, I don't care if you live in Texas or if you live here in Washington State. I don't want anybody I don't know walking through my property, walking by my house.
Crazy is we're like on this slippery slope of like bending legalities, Brandi, because we're like, but they just want food and water. Oh, but they're not causing any harm. But they're still, like what Brent Smith was saying, the Kinney County attorney, the trespassing law has nothing to do with immigration. Mm-hmm. Are you on a property that you are not supposed to be on? Yes, that is a law, right? And we're going, okay. Like it is something that the United States needs to take notice of, because it is a slippery slope right now.
Yeah, any of us living anywhere would have serious concerns if there are groups of people who we do not know walking through our property. That should be non-controversial.
Yeah. But for some reason, we're dismissing it. And I'm not sure. I think I don't know why. I honestly can't wrap my head around why we are kind of dismissing this as a non-problem.
Yeah, I guess, if I was one of these ranchers, I would wonder if there is a recourse for me. If the federal government cannot stop people from coming in great numbers into my land, from the southern border, I guess, is there anything that they can do? Can they sue the feds? Can they try some sort of recourse like that?
I mean, we know the governor there is constructing their own wall. We know that is a layer of protection for them. Lisa's saying that is something that might help. But at the end of the day, they just pretty much got to call Texas DPS and say, hey, come out and help us, or whatever it is. And as you heard the sheriff there saying, if there's a threat, I support them to use their firearm to protect their property and protect themselves.
Do you get any sense from the time that you first started covering the border to now that there is a growing willingness from the Biden administration to try to do more to secure the southern border?
Absolutely not. Actually, the opposite, if you will. The policies that we've seen, we know the Biden administration had talked about the Trump era wall back in April about filling some holes. Now we're seeing that as well, right? So we do know that is happening. So that might be maybe a part, but realistically, the policies that they have actually pushed through when it comes to immigration reform, following Del Rio, where Mayorkas said our immigration system is broken, we heard him say that. The only things that they have done for policy reform or immigration reform when it comes to that, they have made it harder for border agents to do their job. We heard about those reparations that they were considering. Now that's off the table. Well, following that, DHS kind of put these stipulations on border agents saying you have to assess every situation that you're in when you encounter a migrant. I mean, all of us can argue that any interaction with a law enforcement officer could be traumatic. And so they have that piece that they're dealing with. We know that they have made it so that it's easier. You don't even have to renew visas. They will basically roll over because the system is so backed up. So from what I see and from where I sit, it has become easier for people to come into our country. We have not secured the border. We know the border is porous. The one thing that they are doing is stepping back up and doing that wall when we know that Biden in his campaigning and in the beginning of his presidency vowed not to pick that back up. So, that isn't something the administration wanted to do. We know that from the start. So that's the only thing that is happening from where I'm sitting. But again, and now, we've got Operation Lone Star expanded to be able to charge on a state level, because this is a federal issue. They've always had to turn them over to border agents. Local police and municipalities and the sheriff's departments have always had to just turn them over to border agents. Well, now in Texas, the DPS and their sheriffs are able to get involved there too. So the Texas governor is doing things to empower the law enforcement and the citizens there as well to secure the border themselves, because they really, don't feel as though the administration is doing enough.
Let's end with this, because it just fascinates me. Texas is an interesting state, just in general.
Yes.
But the idea of deputizing people, can it just be any Joe Schmo where he's like, here's a badge?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't say anything against that. Now, he does have his agenda for who he thinks would be reasonable. He is looking for people that were former officers, people that obviously know the lay of the land. He wants local people, because there's no sense in having someone drive over from Del Rio when an incident is occurring. So, he could. There's nothing in the Texas Constitution that says it has to be a peace officer, that this person has to have a license even to carry. It just says that he can deputize 10 citizens, and he's already done that with 3. He's saying he's got one that's an ambulance driver. He has one that, if he has a chef, that person can come on and help. Like, he's looking for people that can bring something to the team as well. So yeah, I mean, put in your application, Brandi.
I'm going to take a hard pass on that one. I'm also going to take a hard pass at running through the brush after migrants. I'll leave that up to you. So that was quite the scene.
I got a lot of torn clothes. That is not for the faint of heart. It's not for the weak. I'll tell you that. Near freezing temperatures, your lungs feeling like you're going to explode after running for a mile under sheer adrenaline. And you're hearing these prompts from the helicopter and everything's coming at you. It was one of the craziest experiences of my life. And I'm already setting up to go back out there with them again.
That sounds good. Allie Bradley, independent journalist. Keep up the great work down at the border. It's been fascinating to see some of the things that you've captured on camera.
Thanks, Brandi.
Before I let you go, a word on where our nation stands a year after the Capitol insurrection. When I launched Undivided, I talked about the 3 tenets of the show that we would always be true to: people before party, ideas before identity, and actions before affiliation. That last one, actions before affiliation, that's what we have to see to get our country on track. Without our moral compass, we have nothing. When we prioritize party above all else, we sacrifice our values. When we excuse the inexcusable because it suits a political purpose, we give others permission to do the same. When we point to the bad acts of others as a way to downplay our own, we contribute to the erosion of law and order. A year after the Capitol riot, some of the most powerful people in the country continue to make excuses for that day, continue to downplay what happened on the steps and in the halls of our nation's capital. And I'd ask myself why they do it, but I know why they do it. They do it because they think it'll help them win elections. They do it because they think it'll help them get viewers. But it comes at the cost of their country. And I, for one, I don't trust anyone who'd be willing to pay such a steep price. Thanks for joining us on Undivided. If you have not become a subscriber already, please do so. You can join this movement dedicated to bringing common sense and reason back into our discourse, not only in politics, but in the media. You can become a subscriber at patreon.com/undivided or by becoming a member of my locals community, brandikruse.locals.com. Undivided is brought to you by 1530 Mortgage. Visit them at 1530mortgage.com.